This podcast is sponsored by BetterHelp. After experiencing trauma, I went to therapy, and my therapist guided me through a difficult time in my life. They helped me understand what was happening and provided me with tools to cope and find my own strength and resilience. Their experience and compassion were invaluable and enabled me to rebuild my life and move forward. I strongly believe in the power of therapy to help people through difficult times. BetterHelp connects you with a licensed therapist who is trained to listen and give you helpful, unbiased advice. First, you go to their site. You can use my link, betterhelp.com/resilience. You answer a few questions, and BetterHelp will match you to a professional who has years of experience helping people with struggles just like yours. Let BetterHelp connect you to a therapist who can support you, all from the comfort of your own home. Visit betterhelp.com/resilience or choose podcast, then notes on resilience during sign up and enjoy a special discount on your first month.
One of the first steps is acknowledging your trauma, acknowledging it and accepting it. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. Everybody has stories, but what makes the difference is you're willing to share your story versus others are not. And that's what makes you a superstar.
Hello, and welcome to Notes on Resilience. I'm your host, Manya Chilinsky. Today is another episode in our series, Advocating for Resilience. And my guest is Reggie Reed. He's an author, and his first book is The Day My Mother Never Came Home. He shares the story of her murder and the subsequent indictment and trial of his father, and what that has meant for his life and his mental health. And he shares with us the importance of being willing and able to share your own story. Let's listen in. Listen to Notes on Resilience on Apple Podcasts and subscribe. And we'd love for you to leave a review too. And hey, I'm really curious. Would you recommend this show to a friend? If not, would you be willing to let me know why? Send me an email right now and tell me what's stopping you from recommending Notes on Resilience to your friends. What can I do to make this the kind of show you would recommend to your friends? I want to make a show that people really enjoy and brings value to their lives. You can email me at manya@manyachilinsky.com or fill out the form in the show notes. Thanks. Reggie, thanks for being here today. I'm so glad I'm getting an opportunity to speak with you.
Thanks, Manya, for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And before we dig into the topic of advocacy and role of identity and breaking barriers, which is what you and I are going to talk about, I want to find out if you could have dinner with any historical figure, who would it be and why?
Well, that's an interesting one. It's so many historical figures that I do admire, but one that stands out is Nelson Mandela. And in particularly, it's, the life and legacy that he left as a leader and, being the activist that he was, it displayed a symbol of reconciliation in ways that they always intrigued me, because he did so much as far as, when the apartheid happened in South Africa, and just fighting through that, those challenges and triumph, his fight to overcome that was bar none. And
yeah,
I look at myself and the things I've experienced through life with trauma, and I guess being dealt a unfair hand of cards. I faced uphill battles as well.
Yeah, I agree. He is amazing, and I would want to join you on that dinner. I sometimes think about his level of forgiveness and his ability to move on, and I just think it's next level. So thank you for sharing that. And Reggie, can you tell us just a little bit about your story and how is it that you come to be an advocate and activist?
So a little bit about my story. At the age of 6, my mother was brutally murdered, and I put emphasis on the brutal part because that's That's exactly what happened. It's not that one murder is better or worse than the other. It's all horrible. I wish that nobody experienced that type of tragedy. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she was stabbed over a dozen times. It was gruesome. And fast forward, after that, my father raised me from the age of 6 up until adulthood. Life had its challenges. My dad has a military background. He's a Marine. Mm-hmm. Anything about Marines, they're tough. Their nickname is Leatherneck, and that's for a reason. So I came up with a upbringing that was very strict, hardcore, But I think now I appreciate that because I know and I understand how to navigate through life and challenges and find a way if one is not immediately presented in front of me. And fast forward, after dealing with that trauma in an early age, I became aware over 30 plus years later that I get a phone call. My dad, it was a courtesy call saying that my dad was indicted for second-degree murder of my mother.
Wow.
So that's a little bit about, me experiencing trauma and tragedy on the front end of my life and also on the back end. And to your question, how, like, where's the advocacy? And like, how does that come full circle? Because I look at advocacy as, it's, you got advocates and you have supporters. It's a big difference.
Okay. What's the difference?
Supporters is like, hey, Manya, will you support me with this fundraiser? Sure. Yeah, you're a nice person, right? You'll help out. Or, hey, can I get your support on this initiative that's involving substance abuse? Yeah, sure, I'll support you. Advocacy, in my opinion, is going a step further. It's really trying to induce change without, for example, if someone's like an advocate for an individual, that means they're speaking about you when you're not in the room. So advocacy from a subject matter standpoint is, just defending and promoting a cause where it's popular or unpopular. But you're all in and you're all about bringing positive change. It's about speaking up on behalf of people that feel like they don't have a voice or feel like they don't want to be heard, and just putting yourself out there and exposing yourself no matter what the consequences may be or the criticism that you may get. And that ties into my story because that's why I wrote this book, my memoir, The Day My Mother Never Came Home, because I want to be that advocate. I want to be that champion of telling your story, telling the stories, especially the messy stories. Because, in today's day and age, social media, like everybody's living the best life ever. Everybody's great. And nobody has any problems. Nobody has any problems.
Right.
Like, people have problems. There's more people with problems than people without problems.
Yes.
And those are the people that need help. They need help. So at a topic like this, a story like this, like, people look at me like, they're like, people that know me, I work in corporate America, they're like, I had no idea. Like, it's crazy. Are you making this up? Like, it's really happening or going on? Again, I just want to be that champion advocate. Those people feel like maybe they have lost their voice or they feel like nobody wants to hear them. Tell your story, share your story. It's therapeutic. It's healing. It helps you when you talk to people, and don't fear judgment, because I look at judgment. I'm like, no, as long as you're not involved in any illegal activity or anything, you shouldn't be concerned what people think about you.
Right.
Because no one has to walk in your shoes.
Right.
And deal what you deal with or dealt with.
Absolutely. So, well, thank you for sharing your story. And it's a difficult story. I mean, having a murder involved in your past in any way is difficult, but that sounds, you were so young when that happened. And now with your book and the work that you're doing, what is the change that you want to see in the world?
I want several things. I feel like I put myself on just out there. just really open myself up to society, the world, to be criticized. And I know people, your audience that's listening to this will be like, well, how are you getting criticized about a story like this? I was like, well, interesting enough, I am, because I've done several other interviews, and I wrote an article for Newsweek, and it was published, and it was about my strong connection I still have with my father while he's incarcerated for the rest of his life. And people are like commenting, like, oh, it's horrible. He's a monster. You should cut him off. You do this, you do that. But it's like people read the surface. They understand the surface of things. They don't understand the depth of situations.
Right.
Like they click on something, they see a title, and they just, oh my gosh, it's horrible. But if you reflect to what I mentioned earlier about my story, you kind of sit back, think, and understand. So, the one change I just want to, encourage, the world to do is just be more open to sharing your story and being vulnerable. Not to an extent where, you let your guard down, but just don't be afraid, because I truly believe that, I learned from this experience. I had reservations at first. I'm like, should I really even do this? I had wrote the book.
Right.
I'm like, should I even put this out? This is like some serious stuff. Hardcore. But, you got the negative commenters out there. But majority of the response has been overwhelming positive. So I just really want to emphasize to society, to the world, tell your story, and know that at the end of every tunnel, there's a light. It's somewhere. You got to find it, but it's somewhere. And I say that because, this time I'm like, man, how am I going to make it? How am I going to get out of this? How am I going to build a life I want despite the challenge? Mothers play a very, very important role in kids. It just in lives, in this world, in life.
Yeah.
I didn't have that. We have a 4-year-old. We have a 4-year-old son, and we have a 2-month-old daughter.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's a lot going on. But my son, he's a mama's boy. And I look at him and reflect. I heard I was a mama's boy. And I'm like, I think about the sadness. Because every time mama leaves, she's like, where's mama? Where's mama going? Every 5 minutes, where's mama? Where's mama? Where's mama? He doesn't ask about me too often. I could go and fall off a cliff. Whatever.
I'm sure that's not true. He would eventually notice you're not there.
Yeah, once I fell, yeah. But I think back at myself as a 6-year-old. I'm like, man, I missed out on so much.
Yeah.
And just to be where I am in life, and not and it's nothing against the people that are athletic enough, or get these huge scholarships or whatever from athletic, or who is creative enough to be on a big screen, or whatever that looks like. No, this is not taking a shot at them, but it's for the normal, everyday person that's just hard work can get you further than you think. Just working hard.
Yeah.
And having goals in mind.
Well, Reggie, in your story, it's hard work, yes, but you had to overcome a very significant trauma from when you were young. And then when you got older, sort of a second wave of trauma with your dad going to prison. So you've overcome a lot to become the successful person that you are. What were some of those barriers that you struggled with on the mental health side and the recovering from trauma that just were difficult for you to work through?
Man, I'm trying to think as I digest that question, because it was a lot. It was a lot of barriers that felt like I was, and these are a lot of internal feelings as well. Just, I felt like I was just alone at times, a lot of the time. My dad, he was busy, he was an entrepreneur, and had his hands, a lot of things. He was in politics, and like I referenced earlier, mothers play such an important role. It's like, in addition to that, I looking back, I'm like, I didn't have that tender love and care, that is support. Growing up, I wanted to be a physician, and I'm like, man, I look back, I'm like, I had that support, not saying I couldn't have did, but it's different. You have two parents in the house
Hmm.
versus one trying to make it.
Absolutely.
And so I just think generally, because life was so fast and furious, the structure was there. We use this common term at work, and I think about it, like kind of reference how my dad and I, managed throughout, early parts of my life. It's like we building a plane as we were flying it.
Yes. Yes, I've heard that. It's so evocative. And
Doesn't
I
make
can
any
just feel
sense at
what you were going
all.
through.
But it's like if you think about that logically, you're like, wait, what? You're
Yes.
building a plane as you're flying. Doesn't make any sense. It sounds like a catastrophe. That's what it is.
Yes. Yes.
But I bring it up because it's true. That's what I
Yeah.
felt like we were doing in our lives. Building
Hmm.
a plane with flying it. From the support, the environment. Always feeling like the oddball in situations.
Hmm.
Feeling feeling not normal, feeling like somebody's always talking about you, talking about your story or situation. So these
Hmm.
are all barriers, mental barriers, psychological barriers, and I go back and then as I think, the main thing is that go get them, that go get them, son. That's what that cheerleader. Dads are
Yeah.
like but that mom's gonna cheer you on and they're
Yeah.
gonna make sure you're good. And if you don't win the game, it's still okay.
Yeah.
You're winning anyway. I didn't have all of that.
Yeah.
So that was that in itself just a huge barrier.
Absolutely. Absolutely. When you were mentioning your book, you were saying you weren't sure if you should write it, you weren't sure if you should publish it. Now that you have and it's out in the world, how does it feel to be sharing your story? And do you feel like it's making a difference?
I do. It feels great, first of all, and based on the feedback I've been getting, I do. One thing that really sticks out when I first made the announcement, made it on social media, obviously, and there's this group I'm a part of. It's this true crime Facebook group,
Mhm.
and it's people that talk about true crime because my book is it's a memoir, but it's true crime story as well.
Right,
It's my
right.
life. It's literally the life I'm living.
I know.
No, it's not fiction. Let me tell you that.
Right, right.
So anyway, I put it in this group, and people are just commenting. But this one person, like instant message or whatever you call it, she messaged me. She was like, "This is a total stranger." This is when I felt. This was that moment that defined. Like, you know what? I don't care what nobody say. This is one person that was help. I'm okay.
Hmm.
She emailed this long message, and the gist of it was, "Thank you so much for sharing your story." And she was saying, I'm really inspired because she said, I come from, she's like, my father, I think it was her father.
Hmm.
She's like, my father was murdered. And I don't know what happened to the mom, but it basically left her and her two siblings just kind of like, okay, where do we go next?
Right.
And she sent me a message just applauding, like, thanks for sharing my story. Like, I feel so inspired to see someone who's dealt with similar trauma,
Yeah.
tragedy, to actually make it
Mhm.
without hitting the lotto. She didn't use those terms, but that's,
Yeah.
and in all transparent, it is some luck involved, right? It's like, but most of it's just, man, you gotta, you gotta, you gotta put your goal, you gotta identify your goals and work
Hmm.
towards those goals. It's the small wins that count. You don't need the one big win.
Right. Right.
But no, that's what really made me feel and really encouraged me to say, you know what, I'm gonna push this thing.
Yeah.
I'm gonna just try to reach as many people as possible with my story, to help others.
Yeah. I'm of the mind that you hear from one person and they say, thank you for sharing your story. It made a difference for me. And you know that there are many, many other people who felt the same way, but just don't show it by reaching out to the person who shared the story.
Right,
So
right.
you are, like all good advocates, you are making a difference, even if you don't necessarily know that you're making a difference. And your story, it's not unique because there are many people who've experienced the same kind of trauma, but being able to share your story is not something everyone wants to do or something everyone can do. So it's so wonderful that you are willing to be open about your story. And what advice do you have for somebody who is in, similar shoes to you or similarly difficult shoes and wonders if their story might make a difference?
I would say stop wondering and act on it. Go with your gut feeling. Because I'm more of the mind that I'd rather do something,
Mm-hmm.
and if it doesn't work out the way I want it to, at least I know, at least my conscience is clear to say, you know what, I tried it.
Mm-hmm.
Versus living with that burden of what if? What if I would have did it?
Yeah.
What if I would have done it? So to anyone that's facing similar situations or dealing with trauma or has dealt with it, and you feel compelled to share your story or just talk to somebody, you don't have to write a book about it. I would just find that person that you confide in or whatever, and just talk about it. People seek counselors, professional counselors. And it's one thing that they do across the board is listen,
Yeah.
and their clients do what? They talk.
Yes.
And
It makes a difference.
it's as simple as that. That's their counselor. That's the professional. But it's literally someone just listening to you talk.
Yeah.
So whatever situation you may be in, everybody has that friend or that confidant or someone that they could talk to. And I would start there.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I started. I had a good friend growing up. We talked about it, here and there. And then he was, him and my wife my wife was the first one, but I later told him, I said, hey, I'm writing a book. He was like, about what? Even my wife responded. She's like, well, about what? I was like, about my life. She's like, what about it? You know, wasn't trying to be rude, but she's like, what are you writing? Like,
Yeah.
a lot of people write books. Let me take that back. But most people, books that are recognized are who? They're well-known people.
Mm-hmm.
Past presidents, current presidents, actresses, movie stars,
Right.
superstars, baseball. It's rarely a regular person like myself whose
Mm-hmm.
book is written or story who's put out there and it gets a lot of exposure.
Yeah.
Because the story, and I'm not saying no other story. I just read today, and I'm a fan of Whoopi Goldberg. She has a book out,
Mm-hmm.
coming out,
Oh,
and it's
okay.
about her struggles and her her life growing up, right?
Mhm.
Whoopi's a superstar, like superstar. She walk in the room, everybody's trying to get an order. I walk in the room, people looking at me, hey, can I help you? Like,
Yeah.
like what's going on?
Right.
And we didn't order that Uber Eats. I'm a normal guy. I'm a
Yeah.
normal guy. They just say, you know what? I'm gonna put my story out there, try to help people. So my goal, I want people. It's more people like me and normal people out there. I want to relate. I want to connect with those individuals. So
Yes. Absolutely.
anyway,
Well,
sorry.
Reggie, we're getting close to the end of our time. Are there any final thoughts you want to leave with us about your story, about your work, about your advocacy?
I just want to reiterate. Whoever's listening to this and you have a story that you want to share, share. Take baby steps. Just talk about it. Get comfortable talking about it. If you need help, seek help, and just know that it's options. It's options. Options build confidence. You got to realize that. And one of the first steps is acknowledging your trauma,
Mm-hmm.
acknowledging it and accepting it. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. Everybody has stories, but what makes the difference is you're willing to share your story versus others are not. And that's what makes you a superstar in the end. So,
yeah. Oh, thank you for that. And Reggie, how can people find out more about you and your book, and how can they reach you?
So I have a website. It's rlreed.com. It shares a little bit about my story, where to purchase my book. It's on Amazon. Everybody goes to Amazon these days, but it's also available on barnesandnoble.com,
Excellent.
walmart.com, and other book outlets. rlreed.com is my website. Kind of goes in brief detail about, my story and the tragedy that I experienced. That's how you can reach me.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We'll put the link in the show notes. And so folks can find you and they can find your book and learn more about your story. And Reggie, thank you so much for sharing your story with all of us and coming as a guest on the podcast today. It's been wonderful to hear your story and your work.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. I hope you got as much out of this conversation as I did. So if you'd like to learn more about me, Manya Chilinsky, I work with organizations to help understand how to create environments where people can thrive after difficult life experiences. And I do this through talks and consulting. I'm a survivor of mass violence, and I use my experience to help leaders learn about resiliency, compassion, and trauma-sensitive leadership, to build strategies to enable teams to thrive and be engaged amidst difficulty and turmoil. If this is something you want to learn more about, visit my website, www.manyachilinsky.com, or email me at manya@manyachilinsky, or stop by my social media on LinkedIn and Twitter. Thanks so much.